In the upscale dining room of Bella Vista, a casually dressed black man was about to request a simple table for one. What appeared to be an ordinary evening turned tense when the restaurant manager delivered a crushing rejection. "We don't serve people like you here." Marcus Lane wasn't your typical customer seeking dinner. For over a decade, he had been a tech industry powerhouse, known for building multiple companies from nothing and employing thousands across the nation. When Charlotte Blake dismissed him based purely on his appearance, she had no idea she was refusing service to her own boss. Marcus had deliberately dressed down to test his new investment, triggering a confrontation that would expose the ugly truth beneath the restaurant's polished surface. What began as an undercover evaluation would become a masterclass in quiet justice. The exclusive establishment would never be the same after one woman's prejudice met one man's power to change everything. Before we jump in, let me ask you, are you the type who watches quietly, or the one who speaks up? Comment which one you are. Either way, this story's for you. The California sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk as Marcus Lane approached Bella Vista, the upscale restaurant he'd purchased just 3 weeks ago. He'd deliberately chosen his most casual attire: worn jeans, a simple gray hoodie, and scuffed sneakers that had seen better days. To any observer, he looked like a man who'd wandered off the street, not the tech millionaire who now owned the elegant establishment before him. Marcus paused at the entrance, watching through the floor-to-ceiling windows as staff moved with practiced precision. Crystal glasses caught the light, white tablecloths were pressed to perfection, and well-dressed patrons leaned into intimate conversations over wine that cost more than most people's weekly groceries. This was his investment, not just in a business, but in a vision of what hospitality could be when done right. The heavy glass door chimed softly as he entered. Immediately, Marcus felt the shift in atmosphere. Conversations didn't stop, but glances flickered his way. The hostess, a young woman with perfectly styled blonde hair, looked up from her reservation book with a smile that faltered the moment she took in his appearance. "Good evening," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying the calm confidence of a man who'd built an empire from nothing. "I'd like a table for one, please." The hostess hesitated, her manicured fingers drumming against the podium. Well, let me check our availability." Her eyes darted toward the dining room, which clearly had several empty tables, then back to Marcus with barely concealed uncertainty. Before she could respond further, Charlotte Blake materialized beside her like a polished guardian angel. The restaurant manager embodied everything. The establishment stood for navy blue tailored suit over a sleek black blouse, red lipstick sharp as command, and a smile so polished it might as well have been lacquered on. At 42, Charlotte had climbed the hospitality ladder by understanding that image was everything. And right now, the image walking through her door didn't match her standards. "Is there a problem here?" Charlotte's voice carried the kind of sweetness that barely masked steel beneath. "No problem at all," Marcus replied evenly. "I was just hoping for a table." Charlotte's eyes performed a clinical assessment, taking in his casual clothes, his relaxed posture, the absence of the usual markers of wealth her clientele displayed. In her world, appearance was currency, and Marcus appeared bankrupt. "I'm sorry," she said, her smile never wavering, "but we're fully booked this evening." The lie came so smoothly it might have been rehearsed. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at one of the establishments down the street. There's a lovely sports bar just 3 blocks away." Marcus nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. He glanced around the dining room once more, noting the empty tables, the way other patrons were being seated without reservations, the careful choreography of exclusion playing out before him. Tyler Morrison, a young waiter with kind eyes and nervous energy, had been watching the exchange from behind the bar. Fresh out of college and new to the service industry, he'd taken the job at Bella Vista because he needed the money and believed in treating people well. Now, standing 20 feet away with a tray of wine glasses in his hands, he felt something ugly coiling in his stomach. He wanted to speak up, to offer Marcus a table in his section, but Charlotte's authority held him frozen. "Actually," Marcus said, stepping closer to Charlotte, his voice remaining perfectly calm, "I think there might be some confusion. I'd really appreciate just a simple table. I'm not asking for anything special." Charlotte's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. This was the moment she'd been waiting for, the chance to establish her authority, to protect what she saw as the restaurant's carefully curated atmosphere. She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a tone meant for his ears alone. "Listen," she said, each word carefully measured. "We don't serve people like you here. This is an upscale establishment with certain standards. I'm sure you understand." The words hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. Marcus felt them settle into the space between them, felt the weight of assumptions and prejudices that had followed him his entire life, even as he'd built companies and employed thousands. But instead of the anger that might have been expected, something else flickered in his dark eyes: patience, calculation, and perhaps the ghost of a smile. "People like me," he repeated softly, not as a question but as a statement. He was filing away for future reference. Tyler's grip tightened on his tray. From the kitchen doorway, Chef Alina Vasquez, a 45-year-old immigrant who'd worked her way up from prep cook to head chef, had caught enough of the exchange to feel her own anger rising. She'd never liked Charlotte's attitude. The way the manager seemed to believe she was somehow better than the people who actually made the restaurant function. Marcus took a step back, his hands remaining relaxed at his sides. I understand perfectly, he said. Thank you for making your position so clear. He turned toward the door, but paused just before reaching it. Have a pleasant evening, he called back, loud enough for several nearby tables to hear. All of you, as the door closed behind him. Charlotte smoothed her suit and returned to her duties as if nothing had happened. But Tyler remained frozen behind the bar. The image of Marcus's quiet dignity burned into his memory. In the kitchen, Elena shook her head and muttered something, in Spanish that probably wasn't complimentary. Outside, Marcus walked perhaps 50 feet before pulling out his phone. The call was answered on the first ring. David, it's Marcus. Have the team meet me at the back entrance. He paused, looking back at the restaurant's glowing windows. And David, keep it quiet. I'm not done testing yet. The real evaluation was just beginning. 20 minutes later, Marcus stood in the alley behind Bella Vista, watching David Rodriguez, his regional operations manager, approach with barely contained excitement. David had worked with Marcus for 5 years, overseeing acquisitions and transitions, and he'd never seen his boss take such a personal interest in the ground-level operations of a new property. Marcus, what the hell happened in there? David asked, his voice a mixture of concern and curiosity. Behind him, 2 other members of Marcus's management team waited by their car, briefcases in hand, ready for what they'd assumed would be a standard ownership introduction meeting. Exactly what I hoped wouldn't happen, Marcus replied quietly, but exactly what I needed to see. He gestured toward the restaurant's back entrance. I want to go back in, but through the service door. Can you get us access without alerting the front of house staff? David nodded, pulling out his phone to contact the building's property manager. Within minutes, they were inside, moving through the restaurant's service corridors like ghosts. Marcus had insisted that his identity remain concealed. He wanted to observe the natural rhythm of his new investment. To see how Charlotte's earlier behavior fit into the larger culture of the establishment, they positioned themselves in a small, manager's office with a clear view of the dining room through one-way glass that Charlotte had installed for security purposes. From this vantage point, Marcus could watch the evening unfold like a silent film, each interaction telling him volumes about the restaurant's true character. Charlotte moved through the dining room with the confidence of a queen, surveying her domain. She lingered at tables occupied by well-dressed couples, her laugh a carefully modulated symphony of hospitality. When a middle-aged man in an expensive suit requested a wine recommendation, she personally escorted the sommelier to his table. When a young couple celebrated their anniversary, she arranged for complimentary champagne and personally delivered their dessert. But Marcus also noticed what she didn't do. When an elderly Latino man entered alone, dressed in clean but obviously older clothes, Charlotte directed him to the bar area rather than offering him a proper table. When a young black woman arrived for what appeared to be a business dinner, Charlotte seated her at a table near the kitchen door. Despite several premium spots remaining available, she's creating 2 different restaurants, Marcus murmured to David, one for people who look like they belong, and another for everyone else. From his position behind the bar, Tyler was beginning to put pieces together. He'd overheard enough of the conversation between David and the property manager to suspect that something significant was happening. When he caught Elena's eye across the dining room, she made a subtle gesture toward the office where Marcus was observing. Elena had worked at enough establishments to recognize the signs of an ownership evaluation, and she'd begun to suspect that the man Charlotte had turned away might be more important than anyone realized. Mira, Elena whispered to her sous chef, nodding toward Charlotte as the manager laughed too loudly at a patron's mediocre joke. She thinks she's so smart, but she's about to learn something. As the evening progressed, Marcus made careful note just about Charlotte's discriminatory behavior, but about the staff members who seemed uncomfortable with it. Tyler, he noticed, went out of his way to provide excellent service to every guest, regardless of their appearance or assumed status. Elena ensured that every plate leaving her kitchen met the same high standards, whether it was destined for a premium table or one of Charlotte's less favored spots. Around 9:30, a couple entered who made Charlotte's eyes light up like Christmas morning. The man wore a designer suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and the woman carried a handbag that Marcus recognized as costing several $1,000s. Charlotte practically floated across the dining room to greet them. Personally, Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood, she purred. How wonderful to see you again. Your usual table is ready, of course. As she escorted them to the best spot in the house, a corner table with perfect lighting and a view of the city, Charlotte's voice carried clearly to where Marcus was watching. You know how we maintain our standards here, she said confidentially. We're very selective about our clientele. It keeps the atmosphere refined. Mrs. Blackwood, a woman who'd clearly never worked a day in her life, nodded approvingly. That's exactly why we love coming here. Charlotte, you understand that dining is about more than just food. It's about the experience, the ambiance, the caliber of people one encounters. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. This wasn't just individual prejudice, It was systemic, cultivated, designed to create the very kind of exclusive atmosphere that made people feel either welcomed or unwanted based purely on surface judgments. David noticed Marcus's expression growing darker. "You've seen enough." Almost Marcus's voice was quiet, controlled. "I want to see how this ends." Tyler approached Charlotte as she returned from seating the Blackwoods, his voice hesitant but determined. "Charlotte, about earlier, the man who wanted a table, what about him?" Charlotte's tone carried a warning. Don't you think we could have found him something? We had empty tables." Charlotte's smile could have frozen water. "Tyler, you're new here, so let me explain something. This restaurant's reputation depends on maintaining certain standards. That means being selective about who we serve. Do you understand?" Tyler's jaw tightened. "I understand that we turned away someone who just wanted to eat dinner. Someone who didn't belong here," Charlotte corrected. "And if you want to continue working here, you'll need to understand the difference." From the kitchen, Alina watched this exchange with growing disgust. She'd immigrated to this country with nothing, worked 16-hour days to build her career, and earned her position through skill and dedication. Charlotte's casual dismissal of people based on appearance reminded her of every obstacle she'd had to overcome, every assumption she'd had to prove wrong. Marcus checked his watch. 9:45 p.m. In 15 minutes. He'd planned to reveal himself to the staff, but watching Charlotte's behavior throughout the evening had changed his timeline. She deserved to understand exactly what her assumptions had cost, not just the man she'd turned away, but herself. He turned to David. "Get ready to make some introductions, but first, I want to see her face when she realizes what she's done." David smiled grimly. "This is going to be interesting." Through the one-way glass, Marcus watched Charlotte return to the Blackwoods table, her laugh echoing across the dining room as she basked in their approval. She had no idea that in just a few minutes, her world was about to change completely. .com was about to end, and the reckoning was about to begin. At exactly 10 p.m., David Rodriguez stepped through the dining room doors with the confidence of a man carrying official business. The dinner service was winding down, most tables finishing their entrees or moving into dessert. The atmosphere relaxed and convivial. Charlotte, still basking in the Blackwoods' continued praise, was regaling them with stories about her careful curation of the restaurant's clientele when David approached. "Excuse me," David said politely, his voice carrying just enough authority to command attention, "Ms. Blake." Charlotte turned, her professional smile automatically engaging. "Yes, can I help you? I'm David Rodriguez, Regional Operations Manager." He extended his hand, which Charlotte shook with growing curiosity. "I apologize for the interruption, but I need to introduce you to someone very important." The Blackwoods leaned forward slightly, their interest piqued. Several nearby tables had noticed the formal nature of the interaction, and a subtle shift in the room's energy suggested that something significant was happening. "Of course," Charlotte said, smoothing her dress. "Is this about the new ownership?" "I've been looking forward to meeting the new owner," David confirmed. "He's been here all evening, actually." Observing Charlotte's smile faltered slightly. "Here all evening. I wasn't informed of any inspection, or it wasn't an inspection," David said quietly. "It was a test." Before Charlotte could respond, Marcus Lane stepped into the dining room from the service corridor. He'd removed his hoodie, revealing a simple but well-fitted black button-down shirt underneath, but otherwise looked exactly as he had 3 hours earlier when Charlotte had refused him service. His presence seemed to draw all the oxygen from the room. Several diners recognized something momentous was happening and reached for their phones. Tyler, still behind the bar, felt his stomach drop as the pieces finally clicked into place. Watching from the kitchen doorway, crossed herself and whispered, "Dios mío." Charlotte's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, disbelief, and finally, a dawning horror that seemed to drain all color from her cheeks. "Good evening, Charlotte," Marcus said, his voice carrying the same quiet calm it had held hours earlier. "I believe we've met." The silence that followed was deafening. Mrs. Blackwood's wineglass stopped halfway to her lips. Tyler set down the bottle he'd been holding with trembling hands. Even the kitchen staff had gone quiet, sensing the gravity of the moment. "Are Mr. Lane?" Charlotte's voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "That's right." Marcus stepped closer, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression unreadable. "The same person you informed 3 hours ago that you don't serve people like me here." Charlotte's mouth opened and closed several times before any sound emerged. There must be some misunderstanding. I didn't know you." "Didn't know what?" Marcus asked, his tone remaining perfectly level. "That I owned this restaurant, that I employ over 3,000 people, that I have built multiple companies from nothing." He paused, letting the questions hang in the air. "Or did you not know that judging people by their appearance might be wrong regardless of who they are?" The Blackwoods exchanged uncomfortable glances. Mrs. Blackwood, who had been nodding approvingly at Charlotte's standards just minutes earlier, suddenly found her expensive handbag fascinating. Charlotte's training kicked in, and she attempted to salvage the situation with the same polished professionalism that had defined her career. Mr. Lane, I sincerely apologize. There was clearly a miscommunication. I was simply trying to maintain the restaurant's image. And by assuming that a black man in casual clothes couldn't possibly belong here, Marcus's question cut through her explanation like a blade. That's not. I don't. Charlotte looked around desperately, seeking support from the staff, from the patrons, from anyone who might help her explain away what couldn't be explained. Tyler stepped forward from behind the bar, his voice shaking but determined. Mr. Lane, I want to apologize. I saw what happened, and I should have spoken up. I should have offered you a table myself. He looked directly at Charlotte. What happened was wrong, and I'm sorry I didn't have the courage to say so at the time. Alina emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Señor Lane, I am Elena Vasquez, head chef. I also saw what happened, and I am ashamed it happened in my kitchen's restaurant. But I want you to know not all of us think like this. Around the dining room, whispered conversations were starting. Several patrons were clearly uncomfortable, some beginning to leave. A young woman at a corner table had her phone out, recording the interaction with a kind of intensity that suggested this moment might soon have a much larger audience. Marcus nodded to Tyler and Alina. Thank you both. Your courage now means something, even if it comes after the fact. He turned back to Charlotte. As for you, I think it's time we discussed your future here. Charlotte's composure finally cracked completely. Please, Mr. Lane, I've worked in hospitality for 15 years. I've built my entire career around maintaining standards, creating experiences that exclude people based on your personal prejudices. Marcus interrupted. That make paying customers feel unwelcome in their own community, that turn a place of hospitality into a place of judgment. He looked around the dining room, his voice carrying to every corner. Let me be very clear about something. I didn't buy this restaurant to create an exclusive club for people who look a certain way or carry certain brands. I bought it to create a place where anyone, regardless of their appearance, their background, or their bank account, could come for a good meal and be treated with respect. Charlotte made one final attempt to save her position. I understand you're upset, but surely we can work through this. I can change, I can learn. You had your chance to learn 3 hours ago, Marcus said quietly, when a customer walked through that door asking for nothing more than a table and basic human dignity. Instead, you chose to judge, to exclude, to hurt someone based on assumptions that said everything about you and nothing about them. He gestured toward the door. I need your keys, Charlotte. Your employment here is terminated, effective immediately. The words hit Charlotte like physical blows. She fumbled with her keyring, her hands shaking as she removed the restaurant. Keys. The sound of metal clinking together seemed unnaturally loud in the hushed dining room. As she handed over the keys, Marcus spoke once more, his voice carrying a finality that brooked no argument. We don't serve people like you here, Charlotte. People who serve only themselves, who build walls instead of bridges, who forget that hospitality means welcoming everyone through your door. He paused, his eyes meeting hers directly. I hope you learn from this. I hope you become someone better, but you won't be learning it here. Charlotte walked toward the exit on unsteadied legs, the weight of every gaze in the restaurant following her progress. As the door closed behind her, the silence stretched for several long moments before Marcus spoke again. Tyler, I'd like to speak with both of you, the rest of the staff as well. We have some new standards to discuss. In the corner, the young woman with the phone smiled as she finished uploading her video to social media. She had no idea that in just a few hours, her recording would have millions of views and turn a small confrontation in a Los Angeles restaurant into a national conversation about respect, dignity, and the power of quiet justice. The reckoning was complete. Now came the rebuilding. The last of the regular dinner guests had departed by 10:30 p.m., leaving only the staff and Marcus in the softly lit dining room. He had asked everyone to gather around the large corner table where the Blackwoods had been sitting, a symbolic choice that wasn't lost on anyone present. Tyler and Alina sat closest to him, while the remaining waitstaff, bartender, and kitchen crew filled out the circle. Marcus looked at each face individually before speaking, his voice carrying the weight of both disappointment and hope. Was not how I wanted to introduce myself as your new owner, he began. I had hoped to walk into a place where everyone, staff and customers alike, was treated with basic respect. Instead, I found something that needed to be fixed. He paused, letting his words settle. But I also found people like Tyler and Alina who recognized that what happened was wrong, even if they didn't feel empowered to act on it immediately. That gives me hope. Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Mr. Lane, I keep thinking about how I should have done something. I saw what was happening, and I just froze. You were in an impossible position, Marcus replied. You were new. You needed your job, and you were being asked to go against your supervisor. But when the moment came to choose sides, you chose correctly. That matters. He turned to Alina. And you've been fighting Charlotte's attitude for how long? Elena's weathered hands clasped together on the table. 2 years. Ever since she became manager. She always talked about maintaining standards, but I could see what she really meant. It reminded me of when I first came to this country, how people would look at me and decide I didn't belong in nice places. Well, those days are over, Marcus said firmly. From now on, this restaurant has exactly one standard: treating every single person who walks through that door with dignity and respect. I don't care if they're wearing a $3,000 suit or clothes from a thrift store. I don't care if they're ordering our most expensive wine or just want a glass of water. Everyone gets the same level of service. The sommelier, a quiet man named James, who had watched the evening's events with growing unease, raised his hand tentatively. What if customers complain? Some of our regulars might not like the change. Marcus's expression hardened slightly. Then they're not the kind of customers we want. We're not running a country club, James. We're running a restaurant. Our job is to serve good food in a welcoming environment, not to validate anyone's prejudices. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. I grew up in a housing project in Detroit. My mother cleaned offices at night to keep food on our table. When I was 12, she took me to a nice restaurant for my birthday, saved up for months to afford it. The hostess looked at us like we were criminals, seated us by the kitchen door, and the server barely acknowledged we existed. He turned back to face the group. I swore that night that if I ever had the power to change how people were treated, I would. The room was completely silent. Even the kitchen staff, who had been quietly cleaning dishes, had stopped to listen. Tyler, Marcus continued, I'm promoting you to assistant manager, effective immediately. Your salary doubles, and you'll help me establish the new culture here. Tyler's eyes widened in shock. Sir? I don't know what to say. Say you'll help me make this place what it should be. Yes, sir, absolutely. Marcus turned to Alina. I'm also expanding your role. You're now head chef and kitchen manager. You'll have full authority over hiring and training kitchen staff, and your input on front-of-house policies will carry significant weight. Elena's eyes filled with tears. Gracias, Center Lane. You won't regret this. I know I won't. Marcus returned to his seat. For everyone else, understand that we're starting fresh. The old hierarchy, the old assumptions, the old way of doing things, all of that ends tonight. Questions. A young server named Maria, who had been quietly observing all evening, raised her hand. What if we make mistakes? What if we don't know how to handle certain situations? Then you ask for help, Marcus replied. You communicate. You remember that every customer is someone's family member, someone's friend, someone deserving of basic human kindness. When in doubt, err on the side of generosity and respect. As the meeting was winding down, Tyler's phone buzzed with notifications. He glanced at it, then his expression changed to one of amazement. Mr. Lane, you might want to see this. The video that the young diner had recorded was already spreading across social media platforms. #RespectBella Vista was trending on Twitter. The TikTok version had garnered 500,000 views in just 2 hours. News outlets were picking up the story, and people were sharing their own experiences of discrimination in restaurants and other businesses. Marcus watched a portion of the video on Tyler's phone, seeing himself through a stranger's camera as he calmly confronted Charlotte's prejudice. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive, with people praising his dignity and restraint. This is bigger than just our restaurant now, he observed quietly. People are hungry for examples of doing the right thing, of standing up to discrimination, of treating each other better. Alina smiled. Maybe that's good. Maybe more people will think twice before they judge someone. As the staff began to disperse, Marcus pulled Tyler and Alina aside. I need to ask something of both of you. This attention, it's going to bring more customers, more scrutiny, more pressure. Are you ready for that? Tyler nodded without hesitation. If it means creating the kind of place we talked about tonight, I'm ready. Alina was equally certain. I've been waiting my whole career for a chance to work somewhere that actually values people, sir. I'm ready. 3 weeks later, Marcus sat in the same corner booth where the Blackwoods had been seated on that fateful night. The restaurant was bustling with a diverse crowd of diners, young and old, wealthy and working-class people from every background imaginable. The viral video had indeed brought new customers, but more importantly, it had attracted staff members who shared the restaurant's new values. Tyler moved through the dining room with the confidence of someone who had found his calling. Kitchen had become legendary for both its food and its welcoming atmosphere. The restaurant had received numerous awards and recognition, but more importantly, it had become a place where everyone truly felt welcome. A young black entrepreneur, in casual clothes, approached Marcus's table, extending his hand. Mr. Lane, I'm Jerome Washington. I saw the video, and I wanted to thank you. I've started 3 businesses, but I still sometimes get treated like I don't belong in nice places. What you did, it matters. Marcus shook his hand warmly. Would you like to join me for dinner, Jerome? I'd love to hear about your businesses. As Jerome took a seat, Marcus reflected on the night that had changed everything. Charlotte's prejudice had cost her a career, but it had also created an opportunity for the restaurant to become something better, for the staff to grow into their best selves, for customers to experience true hospitality. That night, Marcus had walked into his own restaurant as a test. He had walked out as a teacher, showing everyone present that respect isn't something you give only when it's earned, it's something you never take away. The lesson had resonated far beyond the walls of Bella Vista. sparking conversations about dignity, assumption, and the simple truth that you never know who you're talking down to. But more than that, it had demonstrated that sometimes the most powerful response to prejudice isn't anger or retaliation, it's the quiet insistence on doing better, being better, and creating spaces where everyone can belong. As Marcus and Jerome began their conversation over dinner, the sounds of a truly welcoming restaurant filled the air around them, laughter from every table, the clink of glasses raised in celebration, and the gentle hum of human connection across all the lines that too often divide us. The test was over. The real work building something better had just begun. Asterisk power doesn't always raise its voice. Sometimes, it just walks in and watches who reveals themselves. More stories like this one. Hit like and subscribe.